Now, I don't know a whole lot about the world. I try to learn, I want to soak it all in, but I'm still young. And sometimes I'm oblivious, careless, insensitive, and clueless. So I want this podcast, among many things, to be a reflection of my own journey towards understanding the complexity of human thought and existence. Each episode, I plan to talk to some real smart people about their area of expertise, learn, absorb, and hopefully throw in some of my own thoughts and opinions too. Today we're talking about some age-old questions about originality and the depths of human thought. Now, all of the ideas I attempted to come up with to start the episode all felt flat, because they'd been done before, researched before, talked about before, and heard before. Even the idea itself of are there any original thoughts or ideas constantly makes the rounds on TikToks, has academic papers written about it, philosophers have theorized about it, and it makes me question my own intelligence. Do I have anything to bring to this topic that somebody hasn't said already? Even the idea of a podcast called Clueless, hosted by a sometimes naive but authentic and ambitious young person, hosted on Spotify, is not original. Something I found out after I made the name and graphics and wrote my entire first script. But today we'll be uncovering the idea of originality. Are any ideas original? Does my voice have meaning? Is our world predetermined? Do we have free will? And probably 10 other tangents I will fall into. I couldn't get an expert for this on the first episode, and this might be a theme for the first few. Just until we get some momentum and pull. What I can say is to stick with me. The goal is to present in this first episode as many ideas as I can in 30 minutes, as coherently as I can, and let you decide what you think is right. Or maybe nothing is right. I'll definitely input my opinion, but it's really up to you. As this is Clueless, and I'm Tom Dodd. Or more realistically, this is Tom Dodd, and I'm clueless. You might think, why did I pick this topic for my first podcast? Well, I started university 3 weeks ago. I had taken a gap year and travelled to different parts of the world in Europe, Asia, and Australia, and come back with a fresh perspective on life. And then going back to uni, seeing everyone there, and just being back home in general, I slowly realised that I was still way out of my depth. Some of these people form such interesting and unique ideas in lectures and tutorials, and it often makes me feel like I have nothing original to contribute myself. Like anything I say has already been said, and I feel judged even though they definitely don't care. For reference, I'm doing a Bachelor of Politics, Philosophy and Economics, so these types of class discussions happen every week. We often think about ideas related to originality without even realizing it. Like self-esteem, that's related, right? Like, can I be original? Can I stand out? Do I matter? And like, am I worth it? Or even fashion and style. Like, we all crave to dress in distinctive and unique clothing, while still following a general trend, of course. So it's hard to do both at the same time, follow a trend, but also want to stand out from others. That's very difficult. And everything from technology, cooking, to politics, to pretty much all philosophical ideas, they're all based around originality. And then that's me finishing, trying to justify why I picked such a difficult and contradictory topic for the first episode. But today, I'm going to try and focus on one particular branch of that. Original ideas, actions, and the nature of our existence. This first bit might be a little boring for some people, but stick with me. I'm saving all the good stuff until the end. Here's one branch of thinking. Mark Twain, dubbed the father of American literature, stated that there is no such thing as a new idea. It is impossible. We simply take a lot of old ideas and put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope. We give them a turn and they make new and curious combinations. We keep on turning and making new combinations indefinitely, but they are the same old pieces of coloured glass that have been in use through all the ages. And examples of this are everywhere. So if you follow Twain's theory and look at ideologies, for example, they're always built off other ideologies. Not always, but most of the time. Like Marxism, the common example that everyone uses, but it's a good example. Karl Marx's analysis of capitalism as a system based on exploitation, his understanding of historical materialism, and his vision of a classless society inspired socialists to seek other alternatives to capitalism. These ideas were thrown into the kaleidoscope of 20th century Russia by Vladimir Lenin, who emphasized the need for a party with strong leaders to guide the workers in overthrowing capitalism, which displays the practical application of Marxist theories. This developed further on to not exactly follow socialism under Stalin's regime, but the point remains. According to Twain's theory, everything is built upon something else. There are no original ideas, only inspirations. Or look at another example. Most businesses, or at least the successful ones, they often adapt and refine existing strategies, rather than inventing totally new ones. Like sure, there are new crazes, and companies often seem to arrive out of nowhere, completely unexpected. But if you agreed with Mark Twain's theory, you'd say that they're always inspired from something else. The concept of disruptive innovation, popularized by Clayton Christensen, a professor of business administration at Harvard Law School, kind of aligns with this. Disruptive innovation as a guiding method for small entrepreneurial companies kind of blew up around 1995. Listen to this quote from the Harvard Business Review. Entrants that prove disruptive begin by successfully targeting those overlooked segments, gaining a foothold by delivering more suitable functionality, frequently at a lower price. Incumbents chasing higher profitability in more demanding segments tend to not respond vigorously. Entrants then move upmarket, delivering the performance that incumbents' mainstream customers require, while preserving the advantages that drove their early success. When mainstream customers start adopting the entrant offerings in volume, disruption has occurred. So in essence, new businesses succeed by focusing on overlooked markets or customer needs that the established company may not be looking at because they're too busy serving their current, more profitable customers. These smaller businesses gain their success by taking the existing pieces of ideas, like customer needs and market opportunities, and rearranging them in new and innovative ways. It's not necessarily something new, but rather combining existing elements in effective ways to build a business. But you might say, I can already hear it, I would say it too if I was listening. There are original ideas. Aren't scientific breakthroughs an original idea? Well, one defending this school of thought would say that the science already existed. It wasn't an original thought, it was kind of just a discovery of what was already there. To me, it's not so much about stumbling upon groundbreaking discoveries as it is about having those light bulb moments of, oh, so that's how it works. Of course, science is highly complex and requires a huge amount of innovation and work. But in its most basic form, it's a way of understanding already existing phenomena. For example, when Isaac Newton formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation, he wasn't creating new physics out of thin air, but rather uncovering the instruction manual that nature had been following all along. Similarly, when Marie Curie discovered radioactivity, or when Watson and Crick cracked the code of DNA, they were revealing aspects of the natural world that had always existed, the hidden secrets that had been there all along. Okay, well, what about major inventions? Not science, but an invention. They haven't existed before, right? Well, again, one would say they may not have existed before, but they still aren't original. For example, with smartphones, you jumble the idea of a phone, a camera, a computer, and other devices into the kaleidoscope, which eventually, after turning and after a huge amount of human intellect and innovation, creates the iPhone. Still revolutionary, but not categorized as original by this particular way of thinking. So to summarize, this branch of thinking suggests that ideas and concepts can have original components, sure, but they are influenced by previous experiences, works we have read, movies we've watched, art we've appreciated, and the experiences of others relayed onto us. Hence, they are not purely original. Now let's think about this from a different perspective. So according to the school of thought suggested by Mark Twain, if nothing is original and all a copy of something else, or at least derived from something else, it can be traced back further and further and further through history to the first original idea of its sort, right? That makes sense. So let's give an example. The iPhone invention. The computer that inspired the iPhone that I mentioned earlier was inspired by some sort of mathematical calculator, right? And that mathematical calculator has its origins all the way back to the invention of reading and writing. Or consider the movie The Matrix. Quite an original premise and idea for a movie at the time. However, these ideas are not original. They can be traced back to philosophers like Plato, Descartes, and Nietzsche, who explored similar questions about reality and perception, the nature of our existence, and the concept of truth. But even these ideas aren't original. They can be derived from early human communities who engaged in storytelling and myth-making to make sense of the world, creating narratives to explain natural phenomena, human behavior, and the mysteries of existence. They were really the first true philosophers. So to summarize, there's a big difference for me between originality and creativity, or originality and passion and entrepreneurial spirit. And now what? Well, in my opinion, we've reached the point where the argument for an original idea becomes the most compelling, the beginning of Earth. The story of evolution is one that we're all pretty familiar with, at least at a superficial level. I can't say I know a lot about it, but anyway. Look at the first aquatic being to adapt and choose to make that step onto land. Is that a purely original idea? Well, a scientist would shut me down completely. They'd say that evolution operates through a process of gradual change and adaptation over vast periods of time. Like, rather than a single original idea, it involves a complex interplay of genetic variation, natural selection, and environmental factors shaping the development and diversification of life forms. They would go on and talk about how the evolutionary shift occurred over millions of years, and that fossil evidence indicates that certain fish-like creatures possessed anatomical features that enabled them to navigate shallow waters, and they occasionally ventured onto land, which marks the early stages in the transition from aquatic to terrestrial lifestyles. And it's worth noting that the evolution of terrestrial vertebrates was not a linear progression, but rather a branching process, with multiple lineages evolving unique adaptations to terrestrial environments in parallel. A lot of different things happen at the same time. That's just what the scientists might say. But there has to have been the very first one. I mean, if we're really getting into this, they most likely died straight away because they didn't have the right capabilities to survive on land. Or maybe they rushed straight back to the ocean. But there has to have been one, right? Is that an original idea? Well, let's say for a second that it is. It makes sense that it was, right? There's that saying, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it may just be a duck. Or was it planted into their head by pre-existing traits and genetic pathways? Or even maybe it was just fluctuating water levels, or new predators, or a change in the oxygen pH levels. I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe there were other factors that forced them onto land, hence meaning that it was inevitable that this would happen, that there was no free will or choice. The random terrestrial vertebrate was going to do that anyway. The idea wasn't original because it was inevitable? This gets us into an even deeper question. Is our world predetermined? Do we have free will, or is every interaction or action a pre-existing notion set forth that we believe is original, but is in fact determined genetically, something that will always happen? What can happen will happen. Even the ideas that we've deemed original seem in doubt now. So let's pause for a second and try to recap what we've talked about. First, we mentioned the Mark Twain theory, that there are no original ideas, just pre-existing ideas shoved into some kind of mixer or kaleidoscope that creates a new concept out of it. Then we talked about inventions, scientific breakthroughs, and how these kind of prove that theory. Then we shifted gear. If nothing is original, it can be traced all the way back to the early stages of evolution. And these concepts, or ideas, in my opinion, are the most powerful examples of a true original thought. And that brought us here, to the extremely complex and inextricable idea of determination and free will, which I am way too underqualified to talk about in any type of meaningful way, but I'm going to try. But I'm not going to spend too much time on it, as I want to actually save that for a different episode later down the line. The idea of originality is linked hugely to the broader philosophical inquiry into the nature of choice and agency. So, mentalhealthcenter.org states that determinism asserts that every event, including human cognition and behavior, decision-making, and even feelings, are causally determined by an unbroken chain of prior occurrences, such as physical laws, causal chains, or divine will. This leaves no room for genuine randomness or free will. The future is fixed. Opposingly, free will advocates for the human capacity to make uncoerced choices. The definition can vary massively depending on philosophical, theological, and scientific perspectives, but in general it implies a sense of autonomy and self-determination, where one has the power to select their own destiny and course of action based on their own desires, intentions, and values. But how does this link to originality? Well, imagine you're an artist standing in front of a blank canvas. You've got your brush in hand, you're thinking about what to create. Now, if determinism was the driving force, your every stroke, colour choice, and composition would be predetermined by a series of prior events, perhaps your upbringing, experiences, or even the laws of physics governing your movements. In this scenario, the final artwork might be seen as merely following a set script written by past factors, lacking true originality or personal agency. On the other hand, if we champion the idea of free will, the artist becomes a beacon of autonomy and creativity. They're not simply following a predetermined script. Instead, they're tapping into their inner desires, passions, and intentions to craft something entirely new and unique. Each stroke is a conscious choice, a manifestation of their individuality and creative vision. In this light, the artwork becomes a testament to the artist's ability to shape their own destiny and express their innermost thoughts and emotions. Regarding these ideas, I really like the compatibilist perspective. It's the position that determinism and free will can coexist together. They believe that rather than being completely unconstrained or free from influences, free will is defined as the ability to act according to one's desires and motivations. In other words, the key to freedom is the ability to act by our own internal motivations, rather than being forced or coerced to act by external factors. From this viewpoint, human beings possess the capacity for meaningful decision-making and autonomy within the framework of causal determinism. And relating this back to what we were discussing before, compatibilists would likely argue that while our actions and decisions are influenced by various factors, including genetic factors, the environment around us, and past experiences and ideas, this does not negate the possibility of genuine creativity and originality. They would contend that even if our choices are determined by preceding causes, our capacity to innovate, create, and generate novel ideas remains intact. Like, look at the human mind, equipped with its cognitive faculties and imaginative abilities, can still produce genuinely new concepts and insights. Like, originality in this context could be seen as the result of complex mental processes that integrate past experiences and external influences to produce unique outcomes. While these outcomes may be determined by preceding causes, they are nonetheless characterized by a degree of novelty and creativity. In essence, the compatibilist perspective suggests that determinism and free will align well with the notion of originality. Despite living in a world governed by causal laws, human beings possess the agency to generate new ideas, concepts, and creations that contribute to the richness and diversity of the human experience. So, as I said before, I really don't know much about this kind of topic, like determinism versus free will. It's really where the podcast name Clueless comes to fruition. So I'll save the topic for a future episode down the line where I can really spend some time researching it. But for now, I'll say, I don't really know whether we have free will or if everything around us is predetermined. I don't think anybody knows. They might think they know, but there's always something to debate. That's the beautiful thing about philosophy. Most of the time, there is no answer. That can make it really frustrating to study in university for years on end, like I am, but there's nothing else like it. It's entwined in every aspect of life. In saying that, I'm going to completely contradict myself and provide an answer for what we've talked about today. This is kind of my wild and probably completely misguided thoughts that I've been noting down alongside the actual research you've heard before. But this next part is all me. So here's what I think. What if every single thing we do is original? Hear me out. Because of the factors surrounding the decision we've made or the action we've taken. Like, no person is the same. From major life choices to mundane decisions, nobody's life turns out the exact same way. No one reaches death having lived the exact same life as another human. That's literally impossible. Does that mean that the one true original thing on Earth is us? The way we are, the way our life progresses, love, heartbreak, risk-taking, learning, growing up, so original and unique in the most wonderful way for each person. But at the same time, it's so beautifully human, a shared collective experience. It's the most original and unoriginal thing in the entire world. And I know this sounds cliche by now, but I asked ChatGPT what it thought about that point I just made, just to see if I'd forgotten anything. And what came out was kind of beautiful, poetic summary that completely captured my point. I'd like to end this podcast with this quote. This beautifully captures the paradox of human experience. While each individual life is inherently unique, filled with personal experiences, choices, and emotions, there's also a profound sense of universality in the human experience. We share common threads of love, loss, growth, and learning that have been woven into the fabric of humanity since its earliest days. This duality of living out original lives while simultaneously sharing in a collective human experience is indeed what makes life so rich and fascinating. It's the intersection of our individuality and our interconnectedness as a species that gives depth and meaning to our existence. Embracing both our uniqueness and our commonality can lead to a greater appreciation for the diversity of human experience, while also fostering empathy and understanding for others. In recognizing that while our individual journeys may be distinct, we are all ultimately navigating the human condition together, we can find solace, connection, and a sense of belonging in this complex and beautiful world. And just remember, that quote from ChatGPT, while the AI's knowledge may seem infinite when you're talking to it, it draws only from pre-existing ideas and concepts in humanity. Nothing about ChatGPT is original if you follow the same philosophy that we talked about today. It's just very good at collecting everything that's out there and putting it together. Sound familiar? And that's what I really want this podcast to be. While life may not be original and every idea has been said before, I want to express these ideas in a way that nobody has. And that's original. That's unique. Thank you so much for listening to the first Clueless podcast and getting to the end of the episode. I have a few things. You can email me at cluelessbytom@gmail.com. That's cluelessbytom@gmail.com about questions regarding our next episode. And the subject matter for that is going to be about the transience of life, death, and the general theme of impermanence. We'll be diving deeper into how to see these topics and ideas in a healthier manner, as well as a wide range of other things. I'll answer and talk about these questions either during or at the end of the podcast. You can also just send me any email. I don't really care. Also, we have a TikTok. It's at cluelessbytom on TikTok. And it's not just clips of the show. There's also some other stuff there. I'm going to work quite hard on it, so check it out. Lastly, I really hope you enjoyed the first podcast. If you did, then please rate us 5 stars on Spotify. And most importantly, share it with everyone you know. I'd love to get this podcast out in the world for people to listen to and love or critique. See you next time.